you already have it.
100%. So welcome everybody. This is Nic Reed, and I've been excited all week to do an interview with Nic. And I asked Nic here today because a lot of us know him already, and we've heard him on Upflip. And if you haven't heard of Upflip, you can look that up. They documented a little bit of Nic's journey. And Nic used to work with us at Augusta. So first of all, I'm going to have him introduce himself and just in a nutshell, where he's come in the last 4 years. And then we're going to go from there and talk about some other great new things with Nic.
Cool. All right. Well, as you guys know, my name's Nic Reed. And we talk about my journey in 4 years because everyone has those moments in life where you make a decision or you get into a new position and things just change. And then you look back and you're like, 4 years later, you can look back and that's a very clear moment where my life changed and it hasn't been the same since. So that moment for me was in April of 2019 when I started at Augusta. I started out in the field with everyone else, and I found a job off of a Craigslist ad, and I didn't think anything of it. I just knew, hey, I've been doing landscaping for many years before that, and I like being outside. And I was kind of intimidated at first because all the landscaping I'd ever done was, just myself on other clients' properties, and like it was almost like I was my own business owner, except I didn't have a truck or any tools, and I used all the stuff they had on site. So yeah, anyways, I joined part of the field crew in 2019, and I worked there for 2 full seasons. So the rest of the 2019 season, and then 2020, during the COVID stuff. And during that time, for some reason, I decided it would be a good idea to start a franchise. Having no business acumen or higher education. So, but it was a great decision. And yeah, in 2021, I started my franchise. And down here in Marysville, Washington, it's about an hour south of Bellingham. I just stay close to you guys. And I'm glad I did because I come and visit, So I've been in business for 2.5 years. Things have gone really well, for the most part, if you're looking at the bank account. But we've definitely gone through plenty of trials and tribulations, especially personally. Yeah, I've gone to the brink of insanity and then come back and then grown from it. And it's a roller coaster. And you think about 2 years, 2.5, it does not seem like a lot of time, but a lot happens in 2.5 years. The day to day, you don't realize it because you're just reacting. You're just going through the motions. You're just doing your daily tasks. But yeah, and then you look back and you're like, wow, 2.5 years ago, I didn't know anything about business. And yeah, so that's where I am today. And then I guess last thing, I'm part of the Franchise Advisory Council. Any franchisee that's watching this, hopefully you can reach out if you have any questions or concerns. We like to bring up really relevant stuff that we see as part of the franchise. And I think myself, being part of Augusta for so many years, I know the vision, I know the people behind it, I know the direction. And a lot of times it's up to me and other people in the advisory council to just bring things up in a clear way, just like we did last week. So yeah, that's kind of where I am now.
Awesome. So the reason I was inspired to ask you again, and on a different level than what people have heard before, is when people join Augusta, they come up to our studio for training. All the franchisees, once they've paid their fee, once they've gotten set up in their CRM, they come see us and we spend a weekend and train them all the Augusta systems. And several times you've come up and you've talked about your Augusta experience up to that point for those franchisees. And so I hear that each time. And this last time in July 2023 is where we are. Your approach and your outlook seemed really different than it had before. Not in a negative way, but changed. And so I knew you had turned some kind of corner, I sensed with you. And so I knew I wanted to speak to you about it and thought it would help others as well. So to get started, when we first met, you told me about a book you had read. Can you tell me a little bit about that and share with the listeners today?
Do you remember what book that was?
I remember that it was a very big book, and
Yeah, it was like 600 pages.
Yes, and I couldn't remember the name of. Yeah, I do know. He was in prison for a long time.
Yeah, the Gandhi autobiography.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah,
I couldn't
yeah.
remember exactly.
And so it's so interesting. I'll try to give like the distilled version, but I always go off on a tangent. Um, in high school, like I come from a divorced parents' household, and I'll get around. I'll get around to the book. There's a purpose behind this. Divorced parents at like age of 4 or 5, and ever since then, there was just a lot of turmoil around money, child support. That seemed to be everything. My brother, sister, and I lived with my mom after my parents divorced, and she was making $5 an hour at the Dollar General, and that was, I don't know, that was in like 2007 or 2008. Like, if you can believe that, $5 an hour, and she was supporting
Wow.
3 kids. And so there was always fights over like child support and stuff. Anyways, long story short, time goes on. I change. I make different decisions. I decide to go move in with my dad. That's here in Washington. So that's kind of what brought us from Colorado to Washington. Um, and then I lived with my dad. And then, things kind of evolved. My brother is a year and 8 months older than me. Long story short, the tables turned to where my mom was going to have to start paying child support for me, even though she couldn't afford it. But legally, through the system, she would be obliged to. And yeah, I didn't necessarily agree with it. And my dad and I kind of got into a dispute that was not able to be settled. So I ended up leaving the house at 17. And I have a lot of thoughts on that too. I think I've gone through a lot of healing with him, because there was a number of years where we didn't communicate. Uh, but yeah, basically out at 17, and then in order to survive in high school, I already had a job and I was in track at this point, uh, the sport.
Mhm.
Um, and so I had to go live with my mom in Aberdeen, and I'd already moved schools 5 different times in my life. um, and so I never really had like a stable sense of relationship, which I know one of these questions is gonna touch on that. But anyways, so I moved to Aberdeen from Olympia, but this was going into my senior year of high school. It was like the summer in between my junior and senior year, and I really wanted to maintain the relationships that I developed, because it was probably the most stable I had ever felt in my life up until that point. So moved to Aberdeen, and I had a car. It was great. I got it for $300, and it got over 300,000 miles. And trust me, I'll get to the book. All right, the story's awesome. So I would drive to and from Aberdeen every day. So it was 60 miles. It took me an hour on the freeway. And so I did that for a while until I got 2 speeding tickets over 5 miles an hour. Both of them. I was only going five over. One was at like 1 in the morning, so I think the cop didn't have anything, uh, I guess, exciting to do. Um,
Yes.
and I also didn't realize you could just get the first ticket deferred, uh, when you're that age and it's your first ticket. And I was just trying to be honest. I was like, all right, I own my mistake, so I go and pay the ticket, and then I get a second one like a month or two later, and then I lose my license. Because if you get two before you're 18, you lose your license.
Bummer.
Yeah, so like imagine, going into your senior year, you live an hour away and you don't have a driver's license anymore. So that was bad. And then I had a long-term relationship at the time. It was high school, so take it for
Mhm.
what it is. But at the time, I leaned on her for a lot of support, and that kind of ended too. As soon as I lost my license, we couldn't see each other, and then she's like, "Man, this guy's got way more baggage than everyone else." So that ended, and then I wasn't able to hang out with my friends anymore, and I didn't want to switch schools. I just wanted to do the best that I could. The suspension was only going to last 6 months,
Mhm.
until I turned 18. So what ended up happening was I started to have to ride a bus, to and from Aberdeen and Olympia, just to go to school. And this entered like a really dark period of my life. I lost my friends. My relationship with my dad fell apart after years of building it. I lost a girlfriend at the time. I lost my license. And then I had to ride 4 hours a day on a bus to and from Olympia. So they would take the back roads. And so it was 2 hours there, 2 hours back. And I would wake up at like 4 in the morning, and I would get home at like 6 in the evening. And I did that from September through December. It's
Wow.
like 4 months of school, and it was a really, really dark period. And it's crazy to think about because like when you're so far from the pain, you forget what it feels like, and you kind of get complacent. You're like, yeah, it was a bad time, but I remember like thinking my life was over at that time. So, yeah, and the bus I rode, it was terrible. There was all these crackheads on it and people messing with me. And I just, I was like a really small, little, scrawny high school kid, and like I was just so, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. Um, so I get in a really, really low point, and I think there's something to be said for getting to really low points in your life. Um, because there's this saying, it's like you got to break down in order to build up. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? So it's like you look at like the existing structure of my life at that point. It was falling apart, and like it's like a moldy house. You got to tear the whole thing down and restart again.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like that's where I was heading towards, and I didn't have a lot of people to talk to. Um, Obviously my mom did what she could, and maybe I had a few people that I could lean on for support. But what was missing was a solution. I was
Yep.
like, okay, these people can listen to me and make me feel better, but like, how do I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a great teacher. His name was Mr. Leduc. We had early start or late starts on Wednesdays, but my bus ran at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would get to Olympia and have like an hour extra before school. He would let me come in and we would just talk about life, and he was very interested in what I had going on, and why I was doing such ridiculous things. And anyways, long story short, after lots of conversations like you and I have, Liz, like about like deep existential thoughts in life, we had those conversations, and it was really cool because he treated me with a lot of respect, and he treated me as if I had like gone through things, whereas most people didn't take me too seriously,
Yeah.
because you're only 17 at that point. But anyways, I'm like, this poor guy, like I took so many hours of his life, and it's just so nice because he showed up and he just listened. And looking back, I'm eternally grateful. But anyways, I was just like, give me a solution, pretty much. And he just handed me a book, and he's like, read this. And in school, I was very average. I did just enough to get by. I never really, I didn't like school, but I also was a good kid. I never got in trouble, and I had respect. So he gives me this book, and it's 600 pages. I'm like, dude, there's no way I'm going to read this.
Yep.
And he's like, trust me, read it, and then tell me how you feel afterwards, or tell me what you think. And so I did. So I told you we would get back to the autobiography,
Yeah.
and we did. I just had to paint the picture, right?
That's awesome.
So, so I read this entire 600-page autobiography while I'm riding the bus to and from, and it was great because obviously it got me out of what was going on in the moment, and it just really gave me a direction to put all the deep thoughts that I had. All the existential thoughts of thinking like, man, did I just get dealt a bad hand? What does a better life look like? I didn't know. And it was just a really dark time. And I know people go through worse things, but for me at that time, with the perspective that I had, that was at the end of the rope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, anyways, reading about Gandhi. And it's funny, I don't think about this book too often nowadays, but it changed my paradigm during that time because I went to like a kind of a rich kid high school. It was a public school, but still
Mhm.
everyone was very well off. Everyone's getting like new Dodge Chargers for their first car, and I have the $300 beater. So no one could understand what I was going through. All
Mhm.
my friends, no one. It's like I would tell them about what's going on, and they would just have a blank expression, because
Mm.
it's just so foreign to them. So I felt very alone, and I was like, man, am I just the only one that suffers like this? Because like you got to think, in high school, the amount of people I've met in life is very limited.
Yep.
The amount of I just resources, I didn't tap into YouTube or online like I do now and realize that it's a resource. I would just watch like fail videos.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Uh, so at the time I was just like, it's terrible for me and no one else. But
Mhm.
after reading this book, the Gandhi autobiography, it totally changed the way I thought about everything, because it basically, there was just a lot of racial oppression, um, it's just racism that he experienced. It. He was beaten. They tried to scare him into submission, into behaving in the way that they felt like he should. They sent him to prison. Like I said, he was beaten, but he's kind of like Martin Luther King. He still led the charge
Yeah.
in the face of fear and adversity, and his entire life, that was their existence. Was like, you're Indian. This is how it is for us.
Mm-hmm.
But he refused to accept that, and through all the pain and abuse and mental suffering that he experienced, that had nothing to do with him. He was
Mm-hmm.
just born the way he was,
Yep.
and this guy was tortured. And obviously it's a stretch, but I align with that because I was like, I'm born into this position. These are the cards I was dealt. You have to deal with it, right? And the thing about him that was so crazy is that he just never gave up, without even knowing that a better life existed. Like, the things that happened to him were a million times worse than what happened to me. But he just never stopped. And look at what the outcome was. He
Yeah.
ended the racism for an entire race of people.
Yeah.
And now he's gone down in history as being someone legendary. Even though he didn't know a better life existed, he had never, it's like the Roger Bannister, the 4 Minute Mile. He
Mm-hmm.
hadn't seen anyone make it out of their position or the way that they were raised. He hadn't seen that before. All he knew was like, Indians were less than, we're subject to this racism. We can't do anything about it. But he refused to accept that through all the pain and suffering. And I think that book changed it for me. Because I was just like, man, there is a bright side. I don't know what it looks like,
Mm-hmm.
but there's another side to this. And I would be ignorant to let things that have happened to me define the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Like,
Sure.
things have been out of my control up until this point. So, yeah, what were you going to say?
That was the book. That was the book. So, can you share the overview of your life at that time with your family, school, and age? It looks like you did already, but
A little bit, yeah.
yeah, the particular time you were with your mom and she was not making much money, and then your dad, from what you told me before, your dad was pretty well off, and you felt between the two of them that he wasn't supporting like he should. Is that what kind of damaged your relationship with him?
Yeah. What ended up happening, obviously my parents divorced when I was young, and that, I think that event caused all the pain and suffering that I experienced growing up.
Yeah.
And I can't hold them responsible, because I just have to realize they're people going through life in the way that they feel is the best, even though I don't agree with the decisions. And I feel like I'm the one that experienced a lot of the negative effects. I'm able to see it from a more wise perspective and through forgiveness now. Because both of them did things in hindsight that caused me and my brother just a lot of pain and suffering, you know. But yeah, essentially what happened during that time is that my brother turned 18. My dad legally no longer had to pay child support for him. Him and my brother didn't have a relationship. They never saw each other. And so I think out of spite, my dad, he had a lot more money than my mom did.
Mm-hmm.
And, he decided to go through the system, because legally she would have had to pay child support for like a year or so until I turned 18.
Yeah.
And she didn't have a lot of money. I saw the conditions that she lived in. Their house was built in like 1909. It's like part of the house was sagging. It was still livable, obviously, but there was like no insulation. It cost hundreds of dollars to heat in the winter, and we would only be able to heat one bedroom, so you could see your breath in the house in
Wow.
the winter, and it was just miserable. And then she gets this thing saying she's gonna have to pay this money. So, and my dad and I, we had built a relationship. I had always been the kid that was like, drawn to their dad. Like, I want a relationship with him. And so, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of good times, and he did a lot for me, especially in hindsight. Like, when I realized the value of money and nice things, and what it takes to acquire that. He worked hard, and I was never hungry, and I had everything I need. I had nice things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll give him credit for that. But at the time, it was just another example of a game that was being played that I was the only victim of.
Yeah.
I was the only one getting hurt. So sometimes you feel like a pawn during that game, and I think that's what eroded our relationship at that time.
Yeah. That's incredible. So, as you were growing up, what were the scenarios, influences, and beliefs that shaped your family and the life that you had?
So it's an interesting question. There, my family life, there was no family tradition. There was no extended family. It was very plain. It was just for most of my life up until I moved in with my dad. It was my mom, my brother, my sister, and I. And my sister was out of the picture when I was in fifth grade. But basically, it was my brother and I, my full brother. It's my only real full sibling. We always had each other's backs, and I feel bad because I left him in fifth grade. I came to visit here in Washington, and I was like, man, I get nice things here. I get tons of good food. It's beautiful here. It was in the middle of the summer. There was like a lake house, and I was like, man, this is the good life. And then I look back at where we lived in Colorado. It's like we live in a trailer in a bad neighborhood, um, and we didn't have a lot of good food and stuff. And so when you're in fifth grade, you look at that and you're like, yeah, I want the nicer thing. Like it sounds great. And you don't realize what relationships mean to you at the time. And I
Yeah.
didn't. So I told my mom and my brother, I was like, hey, I'm going to live with dad. Obviously, my mom started crying, and I don't think my brother knew how to feel at the time. But um, yeah, there was never a family tradition. There was never a big family. It was just our small little unit. And during that time, my mom was going through stuff too. So we were very distant. That's why it
Mhm.
was easy for me to make that decision during that time. But my brother and I think that was like the strongest bond I had in my life up until that point.
Mhm.
And I just think coming from that, what I felt and what I learned during that time was that people are temporary, relationships are temporary. Because like I said, I gone to 5 different schools. Any friend I ever made, I was gone. I moved to different states. Everything got completely shaken up, and every time is sort of traumatic during the time because
Yeah.
like everything that you were used to gets turned on its head. And going from Colorado to Washington, leaving my brother, who's my best friend, like we hung out and every single day, like we were inseparable. We were a year and 8 months apart, and throughout everything, we were always inseparable. And it's weird. I left that all behind because I could have stayed there, and
Yeah.
I probably could have continued, the rest of my adolescence in Colorado. But I left it all behind, and it's strange. It's strange looking back on it because, like from third to fifth grade, I made a ton of friends. I was very popular. I was a fastest kid in school, so everyone
Wow.
wanted to be my friend. And it was cool. Like I was the
Yeah.
man. And it's so strange going from that to when I moved to Washington. I got extreme depression in the winter because it
Mhm.
in Colorado where I lived in Pueblo. It's like the third sunniest city in the country,
Oh man.
and I loved it. And that was just my environment. And I lived
Yeah.
in Texas before that. So then going to Washington, where it's cloudy 9 months out of the year,
Yep.
uh, it gave me depression. And then leaving my brother and my mom, and all my friends, I realized,
Mhm.
wow, that meant something to me. Because you don't
Yeah.
know in fifth grade. Like I
Right.
feel like that decision I shouldn't have been allowed to make. Like,
Right.
but whatever. My mom was like, no, you made up your mind. And I was like, all right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and then I get to school, and I was the oddball, which is strange because I hadn't experienced that. I was the man before, and
Yeah.
now I was the new kid. People had been together all throughout elementary, and then
Exactly.
I come in sixth grade, and I was a target for a lot of bullying, and it was so strange. People made up this rumor that I was gay. The first week of school, they do like a camping trip, field
Yeah.
trip in sixth grade.
Mhm.
So I have this rumor going about me. I have zero friends, and I sprained my ankle on the first day of the camping trip. So
Oh
now
man.
I'm in crutches and I can't do anything. And it was horrible. It
Sounds
was
bad.
horrible. Yeah. So, anyways, it's like going from like we didn't have a lot materially, but it was the happiest I'd ever been when I was in Colorado with all my friends, my brother, and
Wow.
then going to the opposite where it's like I had tons of great food, tons of nice things, good clothes, whatever you need at that age, and but then everyone hates you, and you're alone.
Yeah.
You're just alone. Um, so yeah, that it
Yeah.
was a really interesting change. But
That's
I
paradigm.
Yeah, yeah, and I think just coming out of that, just the mentality was relationships are temporary, people are temporary, and it leaves you feeling very alone and lost, especially in middle school. You know,
Yeah.
when you're changing a lot as a person, you're already insecure. It was a brutal time period, but I look back on it now and I'm like, I'm glad it happened because I feel like it built my character a little bit. But during the time, it was just like, just so painful. So I've experienced both. I've
Yeah.
experienced a lot in life, honestly, at my age, and yeah, it's just strange. So
Yeah.
sorry.
You
I'm
would have
very,
never come to us if that hadn't all happened. So I'm a little bit happy it did.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, what were your thoughts on religion during those formidable years? Were you raised in a church, a synagogue, a mosque, anything like that?
What's so strange about that, and it's so interesting because I align the best with like religious people in life. Like I always just gravitate towards those people. All my best, closest people are religious. But what's so fascinating is that growing up in Texas, where I lived, it was like Southeast Texas, like backwoods and like small
Mm-hmm.
community. Baptism was a huge thing. Like everyone there was Baptist. And I remember when I was young, my mom tried to fight the school because they made us like pray in public school.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and it shouldn't be allowed, right? Or it's not that it shouldn't be allowed, it's not. Like under whatever rules that exist now, you're not supposed to do that.
Right.
But there, everyone did, and you were weird if you didn't.
Interesting.
Um, Yeah, and so she was against religion, and she taught me not to pray or not to like bow my head or any of that stuff. And it was very strange because I was like 5 or 6 at this time, and I didn't know what was going on, but she literally tried to fight the school over it to get them to stop. And she was just telling me not to do this stuff that everyone else is doing, and I was just like, what's going on? So yeah, I've never been religious. I went to church once, um, and it was a rock band church in Colorado. Yeah. And so needless to say, I didn't really go back, but that's my experience, you know? And it's just strange. And like I said, I just always find myself gravitating towards religious people, and people ask me all the time. I get it from clients a lot. They ask me if I'm part of the Latter-day Saints. I
Interesting.
don't I don't know why, but they just say I seem like I would be. And maybe it's just because I'm a decent person. I don't know. Maybe that's it. But yeah, I'm not religious. I never have been. But I have like an operating system. Like I have values and standards that are non-negotiable, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what religion is, right? It's like a rule book for life. It's like this, you got to behave this way, and this is what a good person does. Um, so yeah, I have the operating system, but I haven't had any training. It's just how I naturally am because I've seen both sides. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Very fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. So, when you first joined Augusta, your girlfriend Hannah had some doubts. I remember your mom had some doubts too. I can see where your
Hmm.
mom would come from because you didn't have any of that in the past. So, of course, she would be a little concerned about you getting into business. But I know
Hmm.
that Hannah did too. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about that and how did the early process of Augusta affect your relationship with her when you were just getting started? And at that time when she was kind of doubting that this is something you should do.
Hmm. So during the time, it's easy to take it and get a chip on your shoulder and be like,
Yeah.
I'm going to prove them wrong. Like,
Yeah.
how dare they think that I'm not capable? I remember my mom, Hannah, and I, this is probably what you're referring to. We all went to Mount Rainier just on a trip together. And this was during the time where I was going through the transition, talking about becoming a franchisee. I was talking about it, and it was tough because I'm trying to sell them on something that I've never done before. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like a fake guru. So
Yeah.
I was trying to sell them on the fact that like, yeah, I'm going to start this business. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to be successful, and having never done it before, except for just the physical work. Um, and I can't blame them. You know, it sounds absurd to say, hey, I've never done something before in life, but I'm going to do it and be the best at it.
Yeah.
Like it's audacious. Um, so I don't blame them during the time. And Hannah, during that time, we had been together for about a year at that point. Um, And this is during the time where it's like we're trying to decide if we take each other seriously enough to
Right. Yep.
continue the relationship. She was going to school to be a teacher, and she was great at that. Always had a really high GPA, and she was super dedicated, committed. And then she sees me. I was living in a van at the time,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm surprised that she even decided that I was worth dating for the time being. So maybe she saw something in me at that point. I don't know, but it's not like I was a bad person or a bum. I was just living in a van. But anyway, so it was a tough sell, and I can't blame them. But I think it was good to go through because it caused me to invest a lot in the upfront learning and try to articulate it to other people, because everyone knows, like, when you teach something, you learn it better, right? Like,
Definitely.
you probably get the most learning out of it.
Yes.
So I was trying to teach them these concepts about business and why Augusta is a good idea without having actually known fully what the other side feels like, or
Right.
understanding. Um, so yeah, it was a tough sell, but I'm glad that they were skeptical, because I think it just caused me to become better, more well versed
Mm-hmm.
in what I was about to do, and it caused me to think through the decision a lot more. Um, and yeah, ultimately, I think everything worked out. Obviously, Hannah, I think after she saw me get going, and she saw the momentum kick in after about 3 months in business, and she saw how hard I was, and we moved in together. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an important detail. During this time between um, December, when I stopped being an employee at the Bellingham shop, and then January, we moved in together for the first time. Other than that, it was a long distance relationship, and I would see her once a week. So we moved in together, and I think she was like, okay, I'm moving to this city with none of my family there. I'm moving with this guy who's going to start this business who he's never done. So she wants security, right?
Yeah.
So she's feeling very like, is this the right decision? And she's very smart. She's thinking through it, and she's making calculated decisions. And
Right.
ultimately, she decided, I think he can do it. And I think that's what ultimately caused me to be successful, is because she believed in me during that time. Um, so she was skeptical at first, rightfully so. But then I was able to prove through daily, consistent effort that she can bet on me.
Yeah. Fantastic. So was Hannah working towards her own goals at the same time?
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
what was
yeah,
she
she,
doing?
yeah. She was going to school. She went to school for like 4 years. Since then, she got her master's, and then she's done like a bunch of extra credits and stuff. And she's just doing everything she can to max out her pay scale, because it's how it works as a teacher. It's like you get paid based off your credentials and with tenure. And yeah, she was just always phenomenal at that. Like, always just very academic, very smart, very good at that. And I was the opposite. So,
What a
and
perfect
and I, what's that?
what a perfect match.
Yeah, I know. I was always like
It's a beautiful thing.
anti-school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so
And
awesome. Go ahead.
it's so strange. It's just so strange looking back that, like, she decided to take that, because basically I sold myself to her.
Yeah.
I sold the fact that, like, that was my biggest sale I think that I've done, is I sold the fact that, like, hey, I've never done this before,
Yeah.
but I can, and watch me.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's so strange because, yeah, I just don't blame her for being skeptical up front. And yeah, it's turned out to be a really good match. So
Yeah. So I was going to ask, did that cause strain or strengthen your relationship knowing you two were going through the same tough stuff because she was in school as well? Like, where were you both at that time? Was it that, oh, like she's believing in you, but you're both having a really hard time doing your separate things? Did that
mhm.
conflict between the two of you? Or was it like, okay, we're both kicking butt together, we're both sacrificing together? Did that help or did it
Yep,
cause more strain?
it only helped. It caused zero strain in our relationship, because if you think about the year before that, we've been long distance. So I would drive 3 or 4 hours, um, through traffic or whatever, to see her just on the weekends, and I did
Mhm.
that for an entire calendar year. So we
Amazing.
were used to limited amounts of time together, but then most of our energy and effort being devoted towards our cause, which me was work and her was school.
Mhm.
So then when we moved in together, it was the same story. We had more time together than we had before, but we were still equally committed. And honestly, it was just it was very helpful because it's not like I had her pulling for my attention and time
Yeah.
during the time where I need to be 100% on the business.
Yes.
And she was in the same position. She didn't want me bothering her because she's got all of her school stuff going on. That's her main focus. And it just worked beautifully looking back on it. It was more time together than we had ever had before. So our relationship got stronger, to be honest. And I think what happened too is that I think we developed more respect for each other and each other's
Mhm.
work ethics. And we saw more value in each other as long-term partners because she was able to see that I was gone 12 to 16 hours every day trying to make this work. And then she'd be working when I left in the morning, and she'd be working when I got home, nonstop. So she was just as crazy as I was. So yeah, I think it really strengthened us during that time. Yeah.
So I think that's helpful for a lot of our listeners to hear, because especially when guys start into the lawn care landscape industry, it's not an easy industry, and you do really have to work hard and put
Mm-hmm.
your nose to the grindstone and do it for a long time to be successful. And I know that a lot of guys have come to the place where several that I can think of now in this industry that had to part ways with their girlfriend because she wanted to party, she wanted to play, she wanted to be a teenager, she wanted to just like, oh, you don't pay any attention to me.
Mm-hmm.
But none of that same goal herself. And they actually had to split up because there was no way she was going to catch the vision of what he was trying to do.
Yep. And my heart goes out to those guys. I didn't have to experience that. I didn't go through that trouble and that pain. But I can only imagine because, she's my world. I wouldn't be anything without her. And what's interesting, Liz, because she was going through school during that time. Once she finally became a teacher at the end of 2021, what happened was she gets summers off now.
Yes.
So right now we're in the middle of August, and it's a different dynamic
Yes.
because when she's not busy, she wants to spend more time with me.
Right.
That's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
So, and then that pulls me away from the business, and it's very clear to see. Like I've been very disconnected from the business. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it only worked because we were both just equally committed to a goal during that time. And looking back, like the stars aligned and it worked really well for us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little challenging now because
Yeah.
I have to over index in the other direction where it's like, hey, it's summer. She wants to spend all of her time with me. And then that requires me to spend less time in the business. But it's fine because things are more stable now.
Right.
But starting out, that would have caused oh man, I can't imagine if it was in the middle of the spring or when I was just getting started, that would have caused so much stress.
Absolutely.
And that's why I say my heart goes out to those guys because
Yes.
like they're doing everything they can to make this work, and then their spouse is also like, "Hey, you need to spend less time,"
Yeah.
and that equation just doesn't make sense. And yeah,
So when you first started out, there was no support. It was only hardship, no family support. You were living in the van, you were working 7 days a week, and you were just pouring yourself into learning towards your goals. So now that you've been a business owner for a while, you employ a whole team of people. How has your outlook on life changed? Is this a new season for you? New thought patterns, new, stronger beliefs? Where are you now? Because I did notice that change in you. So, what is it
hmm
that's different about you?
totally. I've noticed a change too, a lot. And I think what happens is that we're always changing.
Right.
It's and I'm saying that to myself. You wake up, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I'm me. But you don't realize that the person you were yesterday is different than the person you are now today.
For sure.
Um, and what's interesting is normally I recognize these changes like way in hindsight. Like a year from now, I look back and I'm like, huh, things changed at that moment. But now I've kind of been wrapped up in the change and I've been feeling it as it's happening and I'm just hyper aware of it. So what's changed now, 2.5 years into business, um, for 2.5 years, I've been extreme, all in, all business, all work, no play. Um, and what's naturally begun to happen is that like something inside of me is telling myself it's like, okay, now you need to over index in the other direction. And that's always how I work. Everyone's different, but
Right.
how I work is I go all the way to and it's funny because this is opposite of Mike's higher lows and lower highs advice. I go all the way to one extreme, and I do that for a long time until I break. And then I go all the way to the other extreme until I do that for a long time until I break. And then I find balance in the middle. But I
Mm-hmm.
have to experience what each side is like. And I
Right.
think a lot of people do because you don't know. So for a while, it's like all I did was work. And I experienced the extreme of that. And like I hit a breaking point where it's like, okay, something needs to give. I need more time. All right, I need to actually live my life a little bit too.
Yeah.
Um, so now I'm on the other extreme where it's like I'm trying to spend as little time as possible in the business. And by no means is it ready to just ride without me. By no means. If anything, I'm neglecting the business and it's suffering as a result of it. But I'm aware of it and it's a calculated decision. Not that it's the best one and not that everyone should do what I do. Like no one really in their 2.5 years of business should start coasting. But I have the self-awareness to realize this is temporary. This is the summer. This is when Hannah wants to spend her time with me. Um, it's okay for me to dial back, make optimize for um, just hands-free operation at the cost of profits, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, I could be grinding and put an extra 10 or 15% on the bottom line, but I'm choosing something else, which is my relationship with Hannah. I'm choosing that as being more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's causing me to not want to work as much. And it's
Yeah.
like we're still profitable, we're still making money. Um, but yeah, I forget what your original question was, but
It was really the change that has happened to you
yeah.
because when you were grinding so much before, one thing you mentioned to me was that maybe has changed is you were kind of almost a little bit apologetic, like, "Hey, I'm a little different than I used to be. I used to soak
Hmm.
up this information all the time. The whole time you were mowing, you were
Yeah.
listening. You were listening to content all the time, and I wonder if it's a little different now in this season of your life and changing so much about you has changed. Now you're on the opposite extreme,
Hmm.
experiencing that. But do you feel like you're not listening to so much content now? You're more of a giving out, pouring out what you've learned, having the guys kind of coaxing. You've all coasting, you're saying, but obviously you've poured so much into those guys, even and given of yourself to them that it's like you are now just pouring out to others all that you've consumed in yourself. Do you feel like that's an accurate description of yourself?
Not entirely, if I got to be honest. I think I've been pretty selfish in the last couple months. And it's interesting because you can see it translate onto the business and other people. And
Mhm.
it's so fascinating because, like, is this the right thing to be doing right now for the health of the business?
Mhm.
No. But am I learning a lot from it? Yes. What I see happening right now, as I become more disengaged, so does the crew. That
Interesting.
simple. That
Yeah.
it's that simple. And I'm watching it happen before my eyes. They're making more mistakes. Someone shattered a glass window for the second time a couple days ago. It's going to cost over $1,000.
Mhm.
Um, like, people care less. People communicate
Yes.
with me less.
Yes.
Um, it's fascinating. It's very fascinating. And I have to realize, wow, you reap what you sow. This is the
Yeah.
environment that I'm facilitating right now. And so
Yep.
I take ownership over the fact, and I'm not proud of it, but I realize it's temporary. That's the whole key. I realize this is a season, and it took a long time to get here, Liz, especially trying to tell people that I'm not like a hustler right now,
Yes.
because my
Exactly.
identity has been wrapped up in that for so long, and you understand that. It's you want that respect from other people. You want people to look at you and be like, yeah, he's admirable. He's someone that gets after it. We want to be like him. But then when you are not that person, because at Bellingham, like that was my reputation. But when you change from that, there's a certain amount of shame. There's a lot of internal, like tearing yourself apart. Like, man, have I lost my edge?
Yes.
Am I not sharp? Am I not hungry? And everything is like a matter of fact, like existential, like I am this way. And
Yes.
it's taken me a long time to get here, but I realize it's not that. It's I'm not that person now, but that's always a part of who I am, and I will get back there. Because what I realized, Liz, is that I'm not putting nearly as much effort into the business and stuff.
Hmm.
I'm putting the equal amount of effort into my personal stuff. We just don't value it, right?
Right.
Like I'm learning about all these different hobbies that I have, spending hours educating myself on this content, and then also spending all the time with Hannah, planning things, doing things, going and seeing my family, putting all my effort and energy into these relationships. But
Hmm.
for some reason, we view that activity as less than the act of producing money.
It's true.
And so I don't know. I need to give credit. I don't know who said that to me, but someone pointed it out. I don't know who pointed it out, but they were like, "Dude, look at what you're doing in your personal life. Like you're that person. You're just putting that
Yeah.
energy somewhere else." But we view it as like playing around, as
Yeah.
if life's not for playing or enjoying. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. And you would
So
never, just the fact that you're saying that, you would have
yeah,
never believed in a million years that that would come out of your mouth 3 years
no,
ago.
no, not at all. And honestly, Liz, over the last few months, I've just been internally tearing myself apart, because I feel guilt. I literally
Yes.
feel guilt for trying to enjoy my life because, and it's not anyone's fault but my own. It's just what my vision is for the kind of person I want to be. We're always thinking about what's the ideal version of ourselves. Like that's what we
Yes.
want.
Hmm.
But we never look at the balanced version of ourselves that also has the flaws, and we
Yeah.
never look at that as being like that's a good ideal to reach for, because
Hmm.
you only look at the best, where it's like super disciplined diet, super disciplined sleep, super disciplined habits in the business, and maximizing every inch of your day. That's deeply satisfying at times,
Hmm.
but it's also, it can be inhuman, because nobody's perfect. Um, and I've always had the problem of absolutely tearing myself to pieces anytime I don't measure up to whatever random idea I have for myself of as to how I should be. And
Yeah.
then it's like, so I'm either awesome or I'm a loser. And
Yeah.
there's no just like I'm a person existing. So that's where I'm trying to get to. It's just like I'm just a normal person, and to stop putting this pressure on myself, and thinking that other people put this pressure on me. Nobody has. It's all internal. Everyone that's watching this, everyone struggles with this. Every single person. Um, so it's yeah, it's taken a lot of effort to get to that position. But and what I'm trying to do is be more vocal about it, because it gets me to own it more. And it's like I can look people in the eye and say like, I'm still a hard worker. I'm still committed to success. I still want to change people's lives, but right now that's not my primary focus. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean I've changed. Um, it's just different now. I promise
That's
you, I'll get back to the business, and I'm going to come back twice as hard, you
yeah.
know, and that's okay.
Definitely people are finding out by this point in the conversation that you're very intelligent and you're a deep thinker. So you sent me a clip a couple weeks ago on from YouTube from a group called Success Chaser. Can you tell me a little bit about their content? And they do talk a lot about stoicism. So what's your opinion on that?
hmm So the video I sent you, I forget the exact title word for word, but it was something along the lines of the art of selfishness, why it is the key to a happy life, or a fulfilling life, or something like that. And this Chasers YouTube channel, it's just a random channel that posts like, I don't know, David Goggin clips, Jocko clips, or, just some kind of like stoic quotes and stuff like that. Just the kind of good
Yeah.
stuff that you want to put in your mind. And, some of it's cheesy. It's got like epic music and you like feel good about yourself. Uh, but then, some of it's like, it's really valuable stuff. And this video was like half an hour and I listened to it, The Art of Selfishness. And everyone has this really negative connotation. You watched the video, right?
Yeah, I did.
Or you
Yeah.
listened to it?
Yeah.
Everyone has this really negative idea of selfishness, as if loving yourself and caring about yourself, and how you feel and putting yourself first is a bad thing, when in reality that's the thing you should do the most. Because
Yes.
if you show up for yourself first, and take this with a grain of salt, because obviously there's people that exist in the other side where it's like they are purely selfish, they don't care about other people. But the way I look at it, and we've talked about this, it's like you got to love yourself before you have anything to give to anyone else. You know what I mean? There's a certain amount of self-love. You can't just put yourself on the back burner forever, and because eventually you become miserable,
Hmm.
and then you can't provide and do the things for other people that you set out to do in the first place. So
Yeah.
there's always a balance. Just like with everything, there's balance. It's this arbitrary word. um, but yeah, basically, I watched that video, and it was interesting because that video popped up just randomly during this transition that I was already felt like I was going through. I just didn't really have a good way to articulate it.
Hmm.
But I've always been that person where it's like, for some reason, anytime I'm happy or satisfied in life, I feel like I shouldn't be, and I feel guilt around that, and I don't know why. It's got to be some like childhood stuff, but yeah, I always feel like I don't deserve to be happy, and I see this a lot in people.
Hmm.
I don't ever act on it because I'm aware of it, but a lot of people when they come from a really bad life and they get into a good life, for some reason it's so uncomfortable and so foreign to them, they
Hmm.
do something to just throw it all out the window.
Yeah.
And we look from the outside, we're like, man, you had it all together. My half brother is a good example of this. The dude was a stud. He was a tree climber. Um, just really, he was like a really good looking dude,
Hmm.
super strong. He had a beautiful wife. He had just had a kid. All in the span of 3 months, he started doing hard drugs and he murdered someone, and now he's in prison for the rest of his life.
Wow.
And it's just like, what? Like, you look at it from the outside and you're like, what? But I haven't talked to him. I know exactly what happened.
Yep.
His life got good, and it
Hmm.
wasn't growing up, and it was uncomfortable. And he's like, for some, and I feel it within myself. I fight the urge because I know it's wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so strange. Like, why do we want to self-destruct?
Hmm.
Um, anyways, that was a little bit of a tangent, but the art of selfishness, it's not that I don't care about other people. It's not that I'm a bad person. It means that I'm I'm trying to learn to love myself more. And I know it sounds cheesy. I think it sounds cheesy, but I really am super hard on myself, and no one else is. Like, everyone's just sitting there, just doesn't care what I'm doing, but I
Hmm.
just am tearing myself apart
Yeah.
constantly because I'm not measuring up to who I feel like I should be.
Hmm.
And I'm just trying to let go a little bit and just realize, I come back to this a lot because it really puts things into perspective whenever I start to spiral. It's like, dude, I'm gonna die someday, and so is everyone and everything, everyone I've ever known, everything I've done. The only thing that really matters is extracting as much value out of life as you can while you're going through it. And
Hmm.
what's strange is that the last 2.5 years, it's like I've been very committed to the business, but there's been no like other side to that where it's like enjoyment. Like, obviously, I enjoy certain aspects of the business and whatnot, but it just needs to be balance. I just always come back to that word, and I hate that word because it's so arbitrary. But that's the main thing for everyone. It's like you have to come up with your own definition of balance.
Right.
Liz, your definition of balance is so much different than mine, right?
Yes.
And mine is constantly changing. Like,
Right.
if you talk to me in 6 months, my definition of balance is going to be working all day, sleeping, waking up, and doing the same thing, because work
Yep.
is not bad. Um, I don't believe that. So yeah, anyways, I'm just the whole idea behind that. I'll get to stoicism here in a
Yep.
second. But the whole idea behind that is like I'm just trying to not take myself so seriously. Because I know you've seen that in me and other people have, where it's like I take myself so seriously. And I'm just trying to have tons of humility and just realize, like, I'm gonna die. No one really cares about how extreme I am, and a lot of times I do things for the respect of other people. Not that anyone's asking for it. I just want to be someone worth acknowledging.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, that's what we all want. But I need to balance that with just some like, hey, I'm human. I'm not perfect. And I'm just going to be different at times. And that's it. I'm taking myself less seriously. I'm just realizing, like, someday I will die. And these things that matter so much right now,
Yeah.
or the things that we criticize ourselves over, it's good to be self-critical. It's because you need to in order to learn.
Hmm.
But it's not everything. It doesn't define, like, your one little flaw doesn't define who you are. Like, right before we jumped on here, I popped onto my work email, and we got a 1-star review. It's our third ever in 2.5 years of business, and the
Wow.
review was like, it was like, quoted me $500 to mow my mom's yard. I need to dig into it because we don't even price like that. So I don't know if the review is for me. But anyways, you look at it and you're like, oh, dude, I got a 1-star review. I suck.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, it just we just got to stop taking ourselves so seriously. We got to enjoy the journey.
Yep.
Um, there's just so much to enjoy. There's just so much life to enjoy, and I'm trying to learn how to do that every day. Because when I started in business, I had the idea of a destination. Like, there's a certain point that I'm going to get to, and
Right.
then I'm going to let it ride. Well, after being in it for a while, I realized it's not like that, and it's fluid. It never stops. So, um, yeah, I just I realized there is no destination. The destination is the grave. What matters is every day that we take to get there. And I'm not saying I live each day as if it was my last. I don't. I'm human.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I take myself less seriously. That's it. And I'm trying to just care a little bit more about what I want and how I feel. And I'm not saying this is advice for everyone, because some people only care about how they feel and they won't do the things that's necessary. But for
Yes.
me, the longest time, I've only done the things that are necessary at the expense of how I feel.
Right.
So everyone's got to run their own race.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that works for me, it's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for anyone else. But if people identify with what I'm saying, then absolutely, like, this could change someone's paradigm. They could be like,
Right.
dude, that's me. I didn't even realize it. And everyone just has to be accountable to themselves at the end of the day. But stoicism too. I like stoicism. I wouldn't say I'm like the most versed in it. But really, what it all is, it's like it revolves around the idea. It's almost like extreme ownership. It
Yeah.
really is. The whole idea behind stoicism, it's like, okay, things in my life are just going to happen to me that are outside of my control.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I can control is how I deal with it. Obviously, it's something we all fundamentally understand, um, but just trying to, like, the idea of stoicism, it's just like being stoic, like
Yes.
having no expression, and hey, this is great, or hey, this is bad. It's like the higher lows and higher lies,
Yes.
or higher lows and lower highs. It's just like, hey, these things are going to happen to me. I'm going to go through these things. I'm not going to react crazy in either way. I'm just going to move through it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to attach a label to the feeling. Like, even if it sucks, I'm not going to say, oh, this sucks. I'm just going to say, this is right now.
Yes.
And what is my job is to move through it.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and we all experience that. Luckily, I haven't had anything really bad happen in a while in my life, so I'm definitely complacent. I'm really comfortable, but it'll happen again. It'll be a
Yes.
reality check, and I'm gonna have to do some things that I don't want to do, and I'm gonna be like, all right, this is it. This is what this season calls for, and that's just what life is.
Mm-hmm.
So
Good. So we
yeah.
used to have long, deep conversations after work at the shop in Bellingham.
Hmm.
And you reminded me of when I asked you back then, and I didn't remember that I had asked you about, do you love yourself? Because, like you said,
Hmm.
it seems so cheesy. It seems like something completely different than we would ever discuss.
Hmm.
And what did you send me? That's what you sent me, was about
That
the
link, yeah.
selfishness. Yeah. Um, and what your response would be now as opposed to then, I think is much different, because when I asked you
Hmm.
that back then, what was your immediate thought?
No,
Yeah, that
not at all.
you're so hard on yourself then as well, and really hard on everyone else. And I remember you telling me after reading that book and coming to meet us that, like, you, from what you had already experienced so much and delved into that book, you had no idea the wealth of knowledge that was out there to be experienced. And I remember you saying, like, and you were totally sincere, like, I do believe that I've kind of figured everything out and that there's nothing anybody can really teach me. Like, I know who I am, I know what I want. Like, it was very serious. Like, it didn't seem like you were being, you know,
Oh, it was a narrow perspective. It's funny
it
because my
was.
perspective was I have all the perspective, but that's the most narrow perspective you could ever have. You know what I mean? It's such a
You would never
paradox.
say that now.
Yeah, oh no, no. It's like everyone says this, and you agree with this. Every day that goes by, you just realize I know way less than I thought I knew. It's
So
like if
can you imagine me hearing an 18-year-old say that? And
you're like, oh please.
I don't know if I burst out laughing or if I kept my cool, but
You're
it
like,
was
okay.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's funny. It's like, yeah, the minute you think you got it figured out, you're just gonna get slapped in the face, and yeah, like, you should never feel that way. I think if you're doing life right, every day that goes by, you just feel like there's way more that you don't know, and it's ridiculous the amount of understanding that you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
but you only start to, like, you get to the tip of the iceberg when you learn something like a paradigm shift, like you
Yes.
come across some sort of knowledge and you're like, I didn't even know this level of life existed. like this level of thinking existed. And then it's like, well, what else is out there?
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, I'm not like that anymore. And that was the thing, Liz. It's like during that time I had a chip on my shoulder where it's like I didn't love myself and I felt like I had something to prove.
Hmm.
Um, I felt like I had to prove that I had value in the world.
Yes.
And because I never had that, growing up, I was never valued or loved.
Hmm.
And so I felt like I need to create that. Otherwise, there's no point in me being here.
Hmm.
Um, and so, everyone has a different nature, but my nature was, instead of just to give up where I felt like it at times, it was to try and create that value. And that's what I tried to do. And it caused me to be really hard on other people, really hard on myself, not very compassionate or just understanding of people, and just super hardcore. And it caused me to adopt mindsets like that, where it's like,
Yeah.
I know, like, I know. And the minute you say that, you don't.
And some of it came because you didn't really trust people. And so if somebody would have said, even us, like we were really pushing the guys to listen to the Audible and extreme ownership and all that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
your attitude was more like, okay, I don't know that I need that even,
Oh, yeah.
because you didn't know us very well, but to even trust us, like, who are you guys? Like, I have experienced all this hardship, and maybe didn't even absorb, think through it that way. But I sensed that your lashing out or the things that you would say was because, wow, he doesn't trust anyone. And it's
Hmm.
like I have to earn that trust for him to ever believe anything I could say.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's influence, right? It's like how to win friends, influence people. You would have never had any influence over me unless you spent those times outside of work where we had these deep conversations and you got to hear me out. And not that you necessarily agreed with everything I had to say,
Mhm.
but you acknowledged it and respected it, which I don't think I had a lot of that in the past. Um, and then you started to influence me in the other way where it's like, because before, think about it, you told me for like the first year that I worked there, like, hey, listen to books, listen to podcasts, it'll change your life, you would really benefit. And I just was not listening to it,
Mhm.
because you hadn't achieved a certain level of influence over me. But once you did, and once I realized Liz is someone I can trust,
Mhm.
she's someone I confide in, and she's someone that has selflessly given her time to hear how I am. Like
Yeah.
no one had ever done that. And so then once we had established that level, once you suggested doing these things, I started, and it just totally changed my life from there. Honestly, that's why my experience at Augusta and with you was just so fundamentally, just changed my entire life. And yeah, so yeah, it's really interesting. I haven't really put it into that perspective before, but totally. I mean, you did a great job at that. Like, you're a good leader for being able to do that. Because I wouldn't I wouldn't have changed as a person
Yeah.
if you hadn't built that relationship capital with me.
Yeah.
I think I just would have existed where I was comfortable at the time, which was having a chip on my shoulder and being distrustful of people and feeling like I was going at it myself.
Yeah,
So
it's actually the relationship capital. That chapter in my book is about you. So you'll have to
is
make
it?
sure.
Well, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Uh, so, what are your thoughts then on personal capacity? We've heard a little bit about that from the summit and different things that we've talked about recently. And I know that you're a good friend with Derek Doran, and I know
Hmm.
that was a little bit of something that he talked about. Just explain to us what you think that is and a little bit about your personal capacity.
So this is what I find so interesting. Obviously, everybody has a different personal capacity, but what we all do is we look up, which is what we should do. We
Yep.
should look towards a better ideal and want to become better. Like if you're looking level or you're looking at the people around you, you're going to be the same. You're never going to improve. But everyone, like someone I respect, obviously, is Mike because he I he interviewed me and hired me, and I worked under him, and I have a lot of respect for him and the
Mhm.
things that he's done. And I look at that, and I'm like, I have the most respect for that guy out of anyone, and I want to be like him. But at the same time, you also got to look in the mirror and realize, well, I'm not him. I would
Yeah.
like to be,
Hmm.
and there's certain aspects that I can pick and pull and add to my own mess of like who I am as a person,
Hmm.
but I'll never be Mike.
Right.
and no one will, and no one will ever be me, no one will ever be you. So it's good to look at other people and want to emulate that,
Right.
because that's when they say a rising tide lifts all ships.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Mike is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
he's the rising tide, and a lot he's lifted up so many people with his vision, and me especially, right? But I realize I'll never be Mike
Mm-hmm.
because I have a different definition of success, which is fine. It doesn't make me a worse person, and it doesn't make him a better person. It's just everyone's running their own race,
Yes.
but we're all coexisting together. So it's easy to start comparing all this stuff. Um, and so I've just realized in the last 2.5 years, I'm different,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to be Mike. I haven't gone through his journey. I haven't had the experiences he's had, and I haven't committed myself to the same things that he has,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Right.
But I would like to emulate certain aspects of him. So, and the tough thing about personal capacity is that everybody's is different. But what's challenging that we experience in the franchise a lot is because people buy into Augusta because there's a certain way of operating that we've determined is the best.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a rule book. But the only thing that the franchise will not do for you is figure out your own capacity.
Yeah.
And that's the place where everyone runs into the most pain, because that's where you need to run your own race. And there is
Mm-hmm.
no rule book, and it's scary and it's painful, and you question yourself. That's the hard part. Following the system is super easy. If you can do it without getting in your own way, the path to success is there, and that's what you've purchased, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hard part is the personal element, and anyone that says personal and business, I used to think that. I used to think, oh, got to be stoic. Doesn't matter how you feel, just do the business. You
Yeah.
can only do that for so long. You
Totally.
can only ignore your feelings for so long. You're inhuman if you don't. Everyone's got it, right? And it's, yeah. So that's, I think that's the tough part. We see it in the franchise a lot. Everyone has to figure out their own personal capacity, but we're all looking to others to
Yeah.
help figure out what that definition is, because
Mm-hmm.
that's just what you do when you need to learn something new. You look at other people that have done it, and it's a resource, but it's a problem, because if you do that, you start looking at other people's ways of being and their definitions of success. Like, I know I've been in business for 2.5 years. There's people that have been in business for a year and a half that are double the size of my business.
Mm-hmm.
Like, their capacity way different than mine. I can look at that and be like, man, I suck. And it's like, no, I'm doing. It's like I report to myself when I go home at night. I look in the mirror and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
did you do what you set out to do? And are you honest with yourself? That's all that matters, is holding ourselves accountable. It's not worrying about what anyone else thinks of us. It's not worrying about where you rank. Um, None of that. So yeah, those are my thoughts. It's the hardest part of this whole journey, but that's what makes this journey so beautiful, is because it puts you in a position to where you have to figure out where your capacity is. Because like we were talking about, but I think before we started recording, most people coast through life without having the ability to have introspection and pick themselves apart and analyze, am I good here, or do I have more in me? I've been thinking about this a lot lately. This is a little tangent from this: nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like for the longest time growing up that my destiny was to just do labor for the rest of my life, and that was in my cards. That was what I knew how to do. It was comfortable, it was natural. I thought that was what my path was just, that was my nature. I was born to do this, right? What I've realized is that as time's gone on, I haven't grown as a person. I've grown into the capacity that already existed. So
Interesting.
yes, so when you're born, Liz, you're born, this is just my belief. It could be totally false. I think you're born with a certain capacity, right? What we spend our entire lives doing is realizing that capacity, is proving to our, or just realizing the things that we're already capable of. And here's the interesting thing about personal capacity: everyone's is different.
Right.
So me realizing my capacity and what the pinnacle of my existence looks like is going to be so different than anyone else's. And I've realized this. I used to look at everyone, Liz, because I read the book Mindset by Carol
Mm-hmm.
Dweck. It was
Mm-hmm.
one of the first books that I ever read on the Audible. And I realized, oh, you can just have a growth mindset and do anything you want in life. Like I took it to the extreme. I was
Yeah.
like, a
Yeah.
growth mindset, I can be whatever I want to be. I don't think that's true. And I think it's naively positive because I look around, I look at people like my mom who doesn't have, she's in her mid 50s. She doesn't have any kind of retirement or savings. She lives paycheck to paycheck. She's alone. And she doesn't have a prospect of making more money.
Hmm.
She just doesn't have that in her.
Yeah.
Even though it's easier for me from the outside to be like, Mom, just step it up, put in 5 years, put in some grind. She's burnt out. Like her capacity for her life has been reached. And
Hmm.
it's caused me to have a lot more compassion for people in their personal capacity. Like for Matt, for example, he's been with me for a year and a half now, 2 years on the dot last month.
Wow.
He's been with me for 2 years, which is phenomenal. He's an awesome dude. And for the longest time, what I've done is not taken his feelings into consideration whatsoever. And I keep pushing him like, dude, you got to take the next step. You got to start learning how to be a GM. You got to start your own location. You got to do
Hmm.
this and that. And it's caused a lot of frustration with him because what I'm doing is I'm invalidating what he already defined was success for him.
Right.
He's told me over and over, he's like, dude, I love where I'm at. I love the position that I'm in. Um, I'm really happy and I love this job. And
Wow.
for some reason, I walk up to him like, dude, that's not good enough. You like, and it's like, how dare I put that on him? His capacity, he's at his, maybe there's more potential that he hasn't tapped yet. And I
Yeah.
think it is our job to hold people accountable and gently push them there, but don't invalidate people where they are now and try to tell someone that what their definition of happiness isn't, it's not that. Like they should want more.
Yeah.
So there's a really delicate line between motivating and pushing people without invalidating their whole experience up until
Hmm.
that point. And I did that with my mom. I'm like, Mom, you just got to put in the hard work. It's so easy to say. I'm not in my mid 50s. She's double my lifespan. I
Yeah.
can't imagine all the other things that have beat her down over life, right?
Yes. Yes.
And it's hard. And it's like it's totally naive for me to project that onto her. And so I've realized I'm going to lose a lot of friends and relationships if I greet life with that attitude.
Hmm.
So that has caused me to recalibrate. And I'm like, okay, everyone has a capacity when you're born. What we spend our lives doing is realizing that capacity. And I might have a lot more capacity than I realize now.
Hmm.
I mean, in the last 4 years, I've unlocked more within myself than I thought even existed. So I can
Hmm.
only imagine what the next 4 years looks like, right? Um, so basically, personal capacity, we can't judge other people for where they're at and where they want to be.
Yeah.
If they want to do as little as possible in their business and not make a great return, but it requires minimal effort, some people, what motivates them is never working another day in their life.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is that multiple elements exist within me. I was the ski bum who made minimum wage and I would snowboard every day of my life for the rest of my life and I would probably be content. But there's also the other side of me that wants to be someone worth admiring, that wants to lift up other people, that wants to be successful. That's another part of me that exists. And but some people only want success.
Right.
That's fine. Some people only, my brother doesn't want to work. If he could literally never work another day in his life, he would absolutely choose that. And this is so interesting. It's just different for everyone. Like lottery winners, when they win the lottery, there's a lot of stories about people that win millions of dollars and they drink themselves into some sort of suicide or some sort of spiral that leads them to go to jail because they did a reckless decision, because their life falls apart, they lose meaning,
Yeah.
right? And it just aggravates me sometimes when I hear people say like, or everyone's anti-work nowadays, as if it's a bad thing, as if it doesn't provide value to other people, as if it doesn't help you build esteem within yourself and accomplish more for yourself and your family. Everyone looks at work like, oh, you're making the man money. It's like, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Worry about whether you're happy or not doing what you're doing. And if you want to be the one making more money, then go do it. But
Yeah.
you have to also be honest with yourself. Are you willing to accept all the pain that goes within it? No. Well, then that's your capacity. So you better get comfortable with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Um, Instead of looking around at, yeah, those people are just naive. But that was a tangent. Anyways, just personal capacity. We define it for ourselves. No one else can. And that's the hardest, anyone that's watching this, that's part of Augusta, that's going through this journey. That is the hardest part of your journey that you're going to figure out, because there's no rule book. There's no one to look. There's people to look for guidance. I've gotten tons of mentorship from numerous people. Like Augusta is a phenomenal resource, but
Hmm.
you need to develop the operating system within yourself to be able to take knowledge and resources and figure out how to apply it in a way that works for you. Um, and like a lot of times with the masterminds, this is what I hear from franchisees sometimes, where it's like, this isn't relevant, or they think it's relevant but it's not for their stage of business. That's our job as franchisees and as individuals, is to just take what's coming in and
Hmm.
filter out what's relevant. And no one can do that but you. And that's where people get hung up, because everyone wants the easy button. You want to just be able to just, hey, have the path figured out, don't have to do the hard work, which
Hmm.
is super painful at times, of having to think your way through your own life. It's hard. That's why people sedate themselves and they give up,
Hmm.
or they just coast.
Yeah.
Because really picking yourself apart and making all these different moves, it's hard and it's exhausting. But yeah, that's just what we all need to do. Figure out your capacity. Don't worry about what anyone beside you is doing, and be honest with yourself. Be honest with, you have a limited amount of time on this planet. Do what you feel is best for you, whatever that is, and just free yourself from the judgment. Um, that's it.
That's
So.
great. So, money, I want to talk about money, which can be a little controversial for people to
Hmm.
hear, and confusing and frustrating. But when I think about what you've talked about today and what I knew of you before, and you lived in a van and you scraped together the money that you needed, we have the franchisee forgiveness program, which is where you could get into the franchise free, but you still have to have quite a bit of money for your marketing, your trucks, and everything you're going to need to get started. So you
Hmm.
lived in the van for 2 years, I believe. Was it two
One.
years? One full year, saving money for the franchise. So some people would never make that sacrifice. They just think, I'm going to do this thing. Oh, I'm going to get the money. Somehow it's going to come. But something really sparked in me when you spoke to the franchisees not too long ago in July, when you mentioned about, I have enough money, I'm comfortable, just explaining where you are now as to what your
Hmm.
mentality was then. Now, a lot of people would hear you now today, and they would say, "Oh, he's spending time with Hannah. He's doing these other things in his life. He feels like maybe he's neglecting the business to a certain extent, and you have that struggle." But it's not that you're making uh, $10 an hour. It's not that you are now living and scraping by. So people
Hmm.
have the mentality that, oh, now I'm going to not put my head to the grindstone and work all the time and work so hard. Now I'm going to find balance, swing to the other side, and try to spend time with my family and find a work life balance. That's only because you've done that before. And now you have the money to be able to make a choice to spend this time with Hannah. So, can
Hmm.
you tell me a little bit about the mentality it has taken to come to this point, to where some people feel like they're broke when they have $10,000 in the bank?
Yep.
And some people feel like broke is $5 in the bank. And
Yep.
I knew somebody one time, and they would pray for money, and they would need to get money, and to them it was an answer to prayer when they found a credit card that they could qualify for and maxed it out. And I heard this person one time making fun of another person and saying he thinks he's broke when he has $10,000 in the bank. And I'm like, and he's going to be successful, and you're going to die with a massive amount of debt. But it was
Because they're
just,
looking at other people. Yeah.
yeah, different thought processes about money. So can you tell me what your thought process that was that made you to get to where I would say you're successful enough to
Hmm.
have this other thing in your life going on now?
Yeah, well, you kind of hit the nail on the head with that little example right there. But honestly, what's strange about me, being so young, is that I've experienced two very different extremes around money, which is usually the biggest pain point for people in life. Because regardless of whether you love money or not, you need it,
Yep.
right? And it opens doors and it buys time. Like, you need it.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I've experienced being broke, like broke, like poverty broke.
Yes.
I've also experienced, and as an adolescent, I've also experienced having nice things bought for me, being spoiled to some extent. So I've experienced both sides. Um, and I think what I've developed, or where I've naturally leaned as time's gone on, is abundance mindset.
Hmm.
But what's interesting is when you're hungry, it's all you can think about, right?
Yep.
Like literally, if you skip lunch at midway through your day, you're gonna be like, dude, I can't focus on work. I just need to eat something. That's
Hmm.
all. And it's the same with money. It's like, if you're broke, you're not gonna enjoy yourself on a week-long vacation,
Exactly.
because you're just gonna have this anxiety where it's like, dude, I'm I shouldn't be here. I should be getting money. I have responsibilities that I'm neglecting, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so I had that for a while where I was like, I'm hungry for something more. Like, I was making obviously good money and putting it all towards a franchise, which I spent 25,000 in the year that I lived in the van. That's how much money I saved, and that's what I spent pretty much all that to start the franchise.
Yeah.
And even though I had, during that year, just living in the van, spending little to no money, that the account was just going up by a few thousand a month. Um, like, most people would look at that and be like, dude, you got a ton of money. I would kill to have that much money. But
Hmm.
for me, it wasn't enough. I was like, I need more, I need more, I need more. And then I start the business, and then 3 months in, my bank account's to like 3 grand. And I was like, all right, this is not a lot of money. I felt like it was a lot of money at the
Right.
time. Just personally, 3 grand. Uh, but for the business, I'm like, I just ate through 25 grand in like a month or two. So what's interesting, I think right now, like, I'm a very simple person. Like, I don't need much out of life. And I think now that Hannah and I both we're pretty successful in our careers, and between us we have a lot of money saved up. We're very comfortable, we feel very secure. That's all money is to us. We don't really have the desire to go buy a ton of fancy things. I like nice things. I
Hmm.
want whatever the few things that I do have, I want them to be the best things out there.
Hmm.
But I don't want more things. More things makes me less happy. Um, and what's interesting, I think what I'm experiencing right now is what people experience when they're like rich, right? And I'm not rich by no means, but I feel rich
Hmm.
because what I require is so much less than what I have.
That's good.
But what starts happening, this, and rich people talk about this, what starts happening is you begin to look past money, or you begin to look at what value is there to life beyond just acquiring money. But before you acquire money, it's the only thing on your mind, and that's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to go through that season when you're starving and you've got, like, to all the people that have kids, that are married and have kids and have a mortgage and have car payments and are going through this business journey, and they're single income households,
Yeah.
my heart goes out to you. I
Yes.
cannot, like, by those terms, I've had it so easy. I rent, no car payments, no kids, not married, easy. My heart goes out to those people. It's going to
Yes.
be way harder. You're going to be way hungrier, and you're going to hustle way longer than I am.
Yeah.
Everyone's definition of enough is different. Like, enough to one person is like, I can't relax until I can cash flow 10 grand a month
Hmm.
for my personal expenses, my house, my
Right.
car, my kids. That's enough to some other people. Other people like me, enough is like, I live in a nice apartment. I have my girlfriend and my dog. I want more in the future,
Hmm.
absolutely. But for now, I'm so content.
Hmm.
I'm very happy with how I am right now. And so my only job now is continue to stack money and improve my quality of life, because money is not happiness, right? Intuitively, we all know that, but I think it's worth pointing out that, like, you get money to live a more quality life, or to or to gain the ability to have time to do the things you actually want to do. Because if everyone wrote down a list of all the things they want to do, like, they're going to cost money and they're going to cost time. And most people can't take long enough time away from work because they don't have extra capacity. Like they spend everything they make. So there's people out there that are making like a couple. You hear this on Dave Ramsey. It's like there's a couple that's making 250 grand a year, and they're in like $50,000 in credit card debt
Mm-hmm.
because they're negative every month. Like
Yes.
if on their own like personal profit and loss, they go negative every month because their lifestyle just requires so much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those situations are so tricky because it's easy to look at that person and be like, dude, you need to cut back. You
Mm-hmm.
need to not have a nice house. You need to not have nice cars. But what's interesting is if that's what motivates you and if that's your measure of success in life, I don't know if you should get rid of those things. I think you
Right.
should be honest with yourself and realize it's going to be a lot harder to make it work and realize, do you really want those things, or are you willing to settle for a little bit less to have a more comfortable life?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I find that obviously $50,000 in credit card debt's not good for anyone,
Yes.
but everyone has to come up with their own definition of what's enough.
Mm-hmm.
And going into this, I had no idea what was enough. Honestly, wasn't thinking about the money at all. I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. Um, and that's totally changed my whole uh, self-esteem, my whole outlook on myself as a person. I love myself a little bit more because I'm like, I've proven to myself that I'm capable of more. And then the money's a byproduct. I didn't get into it for the money. And I think anyone that does, it's going to be painful. Everyone says that about business. If you're in it just for the money, um, it's going to be painful. And what I'm grappling with right now is I have enough money. Like I said it before, I'm a very simple person. I, we have way more money than we need, and we make way more money than we spend, and
Mm-hmm.
we just keep stacking cash.
That's awesome.
But I also realize that money is going to be put to use once I unlock more of my capacity.
Yes.
And so I've realized right now, I've I've made more money than I've grown in capacity. Like they don't equal, right? A lot of people when they go through their business journey, they don't make as much money, but it grows at a linear rate as their capacity. So
Mm-hmm.
they spend it as it comes in, as they're able to manage and hire more people and buy more equipment and stuff. The amount of money they make gets spent on their capacity. But what's happened right now is the amount of money that I've made has gone up here, but my capacity hasn't grown at the same rate.
That's so good.
So what's interesting is I'm saving. I'm literally just saving money because I know I'm 20, almost 25 years old. I have way more capacity that is untapped. I can't even imagine the places or the things that I'll do in the
100%.
yeah, the moves that I'll make. But what I do know is that money opens doors. And that's what I did in the van. It's like I spent all that time just accumulating. And then when I was ready, when I grew that capacity, because it took me 12 months to even get to the point where I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. So basically what's happening right now, I'm good where I'm at. We're just letting it ride. I'm making some money. And then once that capacity gets opened up within myself, once I hire someone that wants to be a GM and wants to run the whole gambit, or once I'm ready to start another location, that money's going to be there, and then I can use that to match my new capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also realized my capacity, what I thought my capacity was when I started, is way lower than it actually was, and it's still lower after 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I figured I'd be at 500,000 annual revenue second year, and this year we're projected to do like 350, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a minor improvement over last year. Um, and that's okay. As long as
Yeah.
we're making money, that money's going to open future doors when I'm ready.
Right.
So that was a little bit of a tangent. But I don't care about money, to be honest. I'm pretty generous with it. As long as I have enough, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously not reckless, and I care. I see value in it, but I don't revolve my life around accumulating it.
Yeah.
But what I will say, don't just take that and be like, "Oh, I shouldn't care about money," and then don't work hard. There are
Yes.
times in your life you could. This is just comes down to personal
Mm-hmm.
capacity and being honest with yourself. Do you need more money to achieve your goals?
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, then you gotta put in the extra work,
100%. Yeah.
and you have to answer that for yourself. And people might look at my bank account and be like, "Dude, are you kidding me? I couldn't even sleep if I had that much money in the bank." And it's like, then you gotta achieve more. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't even know what the future holds for me. I'm going through that transition phase right now where it's like what motivates me beyond the accumulation of money and wealth. Um, yeah, and I think that the answer to that loosely is like optimizing my life to have flexibility, which money does, right?
Yep.
But right now, it's like this business will not run without me. It won't. I'm still here every day, but ultimately, I think as business owners, or as people accumulating wealth, the whole idea behind it is just to buy yourself time and flexibility to do what you feel like maybe in the moment, or maybe you have a specific purpose that you want all the money for. So that's it. It's just a tool. And I think once you finally get, because if you asked me a couple of years ago when I was just making a wage,
Totally. Yeah.
I wouldn't have had these thoughts at all. I'd be like, dude, got to get that money. Like, let's go. Uh, but you need to get to an abundance mindset to where you look at money as a tool and you're not attached to the outcome.
Yes.
Like, for example, this glass door that we broke last week. Here's just an example. I could get really upset about it because it's going to be extremely expensive. It's one of those, it's always some rare thing, right?
Yes, of course.
It's this like rare sliding glass door that has these blinds on the inside of it that's
Oh
super
man.
hard to find and
Yep.
locate, super custom. It's going to cost over $1,000. We broke a standard door, just one pane out of the two, and that cost $900 a few weeks
Oh
ago.
my word.
So I can only imagine how much this is going to cost. Now, if I'm thinking about it, it's going to be way more than this person's performance pay. I'm taking a big hit.
Yeah.
I can get upset about that and walk around and be like, dude, I'm losing. I've lost so much money, Liz. I've been scammed. We've been
I know.
scammed personally twice. You just lose money. And I
Yes.
think that's what's great about being a business owner. It's like you just you just don't care as much.
Yeah.
It's a tool. It comes and goes. The bank account fluctuates by tens and thousands of dollars every month, and you're just like, it just is the way it is. But it's so strange because if you asked me that years ago, I would have been like, dude, the bank account's gonna go down 20 grand in a month. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and for other people, it goes down $1 million in a month or daily. Like, that's crazy.
It is
So
crazy. Yeah.
ultimately, it's just a tool.
Thank you for sharing that. I really wanted to hear your opinion about that. I know it affects a lot of people. So,
Mhm.
as we wrap up, from your life so far and in the stage you're at, what kind of wisdom would you want to share with others so maybe they don't make some of the same mistakes and so they can also experience the success that you've had?
Um, well, if I'm looking back and like if I was giving advice to myself years ago with what I know now, obviously all these things are in hindsight, but I would just, and you can say something and it falls on deaf ears. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Liz, you could give me a piece of advice right now that is so relevant and like I should really latch onto, but I'll be deaf to it for another year until I'm ready to hear it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I don't know. I would just encourage everyone, and I'm still. This is like an endless battle. I don't think it'll ever be solved. It's like we just need to live, like do right by other people, live a good life. Be a good influence on the world, but also just be honest with yourself and what you want, and don't compromise on that. It doesn't mean you have to be a narcissist. Doesn't mean you're selfish. Doesn't mean it has to come at the expense of other people. It's like we just have to realize we're just people on this
Mm-hmm.
planet. No one really knows why we're here, but we know what the things are that make us feel good.
Right.
Um, so why don't you just optimize for that? So that's what I would tell people. It's like, and I know this advice, it's not going to be followed because people learn the hard way. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you could tell someone not to do something and they're just going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
Because that's how most people are, honestly. You kind of have to, there's some things you can learn just by hearing it, but a lot of things you just have to experience, and then you're like, now I get it. Everyone just has to run their own race. So um, just be honest with yourself. Be honest about your failures, be honest about your successes, be honest about your assessment of where you are now, and where you want to go, and whether that's realistic, and whether you're willing to put in the work to get there. And if you're not, don't beat yourself up. Just realize that it's okay. It means you didn't want that goal bad enough, right? Um, that's all it comes down to, honestly. I'm just trying to, like, I want this to be like a central, like, tenet of my life,
Yeah.
is just to be so focused on what my vision is for myself, even though it's not clear. I'm
Hmm.
working towards it every day, but put that first, but never at the expense of other people, right? I don't think that's ever a good, because part of my vision is to not be a bad person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can't take advantage of other people. Um, so yeah, it's not a bad thing. And just to realize it's okay to run your own race. Um, it's just okay. Don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take the journey so seriously. Like it's fun, business is a game, and you got to get to the point where you look at it as such, because if you take it so seriously, you're going to be so affected by
Yeah.
all the stuff that goes on,
Yeah.
and you're just going to become miserable. But it's like, we get into business to provide value for other people, but
Yeah.
also to be able to leverage the time of other people and unlock capacity within your own life. Like that's why we get into it. But none of those things should ever come at the expense of, like, just your own satisfaction in life. Like, no one, if someone was like, hey, are you ready to dedicate a decade of nonstop work and suffering to achieve this one goal, maybe you'd say yeah, but most people probably not.
Right.
um like, maybe the Elon Musks of the world would be like, yeah, I'd say that's worthwhile.
Hmm.
And Mike falls in that category. Like, he's willing to sacrifice a lot in the
Yeah.
short term. But everyone has their own definition. So that's it. And honestly, yeah, that's just my main message. I've grown a lot, and I've just become a lot more compassionate towards people.
Hmm.
And I won't judge another man for making the decisions they want to make. The only thing I would tell that person is, like, be honest with yourself in your assessment of yourself,
Hmm.
and run your own race. I don't have to agree with it, but I have respect over the fact that they're exercising their own decisions, or their own ability to make their own decisions in life. But it all comes down to being honest. Like, you can't go seek out advice and then not be willing to hear the hard truth about yourself if you're not willing to do something about it. And if you're not willing to do something about it, totally fine. Like, if I jumped on a coaching call and, Lee or Chuck was like, hey man, your closing ratio is really low. What's up? And
Hmm.
I'd be like, uh, I'm not willing to do anything about it right now. It's not the answer they want to hear, but
Nope.
that's where I am now, and I'm honest.
Yeah.
But if I wanted more money and I wanted more revenue, and they had that same question, and I was like, still not willing to do anything about it, then I'm the one that needs to recalibrate,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like saying, or the saying, you want your cake and to eat it too.
Yeah.
You can't. You got to be honest with yourself. Um, and I'm getting better at that. So yeah, I guess that's my message for anyone out there. Just live your life, like, ah, you
Awesome.
know
Well,
what I
we
mean?
covered a ton of ground today, and I have no
Hmm.
words to express my appreciation of you taking your time to come on and share. I know
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
going to be helpful and impact a lot of people. And so I want to just say thank you, and I hope you have an amazing day.
yeah, Liz. I wanted to thank you too. It was 8 a.m. We've been going for like an hour and 50 minutes, and you messaged me out of nowhere saying, "Hey, I think what you have to share is valuable. Can I dedicate my time towards giving you a platform to express all those thoughts?" So if anything, I'm the one that should be thanking you. I'm really grateful that you take the time out of your Saturday, just to hear me talk. And because, not, most people in life, they don't really have a platform to just express themselves and feel heard. So
Yeah.
um, thank you. And we're going to do an interview. It's on the record now. I'm going to interview you, Liz. People want to know, people want to hear your thoughts, because everything I said, you probably have just as much value to offer for everyone else. Because you do all these conversations, you talk to all these different people, like, you're just like a sponge. So we need to hear it. So we'll schedule that.
Awesome. Well, yikes, I might run for my life, but okay, we'll do it.
You have to. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yep. You too, Liz.